Welcome to the Radical Lifestyle Podcast, brought to you by Generation to Generation, where you'll be inspired by the past, equipped for the present, and prepared for the future as we engage in conversations with people from around the world. If you've been inspired by the guests that we've had on the podcast, please like, subscribe, comment, hit notification bells, whatever you can do on the platforms that you're listening on, so that more people have the opportunity of hearing these and engaging in our community. Hello everyone, this is Andrew and Daphne. Our guest today is Fleur Hassan Nahoum, and we've been privileged to be able to get to know her some over the last year, I guess, and wanted to invite you on. But before we get going with the conversation, for people that don't know who you are, could you just say a bit about where you're from and what you do?
So it's lovely to be with both of you. Thank you for inviting me. Originally, I am from Gibraltar, which is a small British protectorate in southern Spain. My family are of Spanish Jewish origin, and essentially we were kicked out of Spain because we didn't forcibly convert in the 1700s. And then we wound up in Gibraltar because the British, in fact, protected freedom of religion for Jews in the Iberian Peninsula when they got there. So I grew up in Gibraltar, I studied in the UK, and in 2001 with my husband, we immigrated to Israel. And for the last 8 years, I've been a Jerusalem City Council member, and for the last 5, Deputy Mayor of Jerusalem.
Okay, and then for people that listen to this, they want to find out more about you, they want to follow you, where can they do that?
So I'm quite active on social media. My handle is the same everywhere. Fleur Hassan N. So Fleur Hassan and another N at the end.
Okay. I will put that in the description box. So for people listening to this or watching it, it's there ready for you to go and check out. Fleur, were you, when did you start getting into politics? And was that just when you were you in it before you went to Israel, or where did the
I guess I was born into it, which is something I guess you don't choose. My father was a politician in Gibraltar. He was the first head of a democratic government in Gibraltar, which is not a small thing. That a proud and outspoken Jew was essentially elected by majority Catholic place. So I think I grew up in a very idyllic place that religion and nation and ethnic minority didn't really matter. And so I grew up in a political home. And I always say that a politician doesn't just happen. You know, I was like class rep, and then I was the head of the Jewish Society in England when I went to university. People who are involved and take the lead, you see that from where they're young. I see it with my children. I see who's interested and who isn't.
And then how did the deputy mayor
the Jerusalem thing. So for many years, I worked in nonprofits, and I think that I'm actually very blessed to have experienced the gaps in Israeli society and exactly who are the marginal groups, and really a university on Israel's social gaps. And then I was working for many years as a communications consultant, and I was asked by a small political party if I would help them with their messaging for a campaign. So I started helping them with their strategy. The next thing I know, they pulled me in to run with them. And I just believe that when God opens a door, which he did for me, because I was asked after 2-3 sessions whether I wanted to run. And I just think that when God opens a door, you cross it, you go through it.
Was there anything that made you hesitant, or you just ran?
Yes. What made me hesitant is that I was the daughter of a politician, and I knew what that would mean for my children. So I did hesitate because I knew exactly what was involved. I went in with my eyes wide open.
How are the kids with it?
They're tough Israeli kids. I always tell them, you be grateful that I have a good career, because otherwise I'd be driving you insane.
I get that. You know, when you count the cost, and you can count the cost before you step into something, I think that makes you a lot more secure. You know the road you're in. You say, yeah, I knew this was going to be, I counted the cost back then and I'm going to go forward.
Yeah. I strive to have balance in my life. So even though I work very hard and I'm very busy, I always make sure that I have enough time for each of my kids.
Good.
Help them, of course, in anything they need, but spend also one-on-one time with them, as well as family time. And for that, I'm actually very grateful that I am Sabbath observant. I'm a Sabbath observant Jew, because on Shabbat, you know, we are all without our phones. We all have a family meal. We all do things that we'd never do during the week, like play cards. And so for me, Shabbat is a very important recharge, not just to rest and not work, but also to spend time with my family, unadulterated by telly or computers or phones.
When we bring groups to Jerusalem, we consider it really important that we should honour Shabbat too. And so the groups have the Shabbat meal and the Shabbat, we don't tour, anything. And it's really, all the groups really appreciate being in Jerusalem for Shabbat, not just dashing through it.
There's a different atmosphere.
Yeah.
On Shabbat in Jerusalem. And I dare say most places around Israel, but Jerusalem especially, just like this calm that comes in as soon as sun sets. It's incredible.
Yeah, from what we understand, we're one of the very few groups that do that. We were touring, because if you're a guide or a bus driver, it's understood you basically have to tour on Shabbat. It's just the way the industry works. And one day on a Shabbat, we were somewhere, she read a plaque to us and started to tear up. The plaque was about honoring Shabbat, and here we are touring on Shabbat. And so we then basically went to the group we work with and said, look, from now on, we're including Shabbat. Bus driver, the guide get the day off. We still pay them. But they get the day off, can be with their families. We'll do our own thing. And anyway, so
that's very nice of you.
We're out to change the industry, Fleur.
I know. You've already started.
So moving forward to today and what's going on now, how did October 7th impact you, maybe on a personal level and on a professional level?
On Shabbat, on October 7th.
On Shabbat, well, that's exactly the story. Once we'd heard 5 sirens in Jerusalem, and as you know, we barely ever get sirens in Jerusalem because we have such a large Muslim community that I'm assuming the logic is that they don't throw a lot of rockets in case they actually kill an entire neighborhood of Muslims. Also with the Golden Dome, I'm assuming they don't want to go through the risk of knocking off the third holiest Muslim site. And so we don't normally get a lot of sirens in Jerusalem, but that morning we had 5 sirens. And at that point, I realized something very, very, very bad was wrong. Well, something very, very wrong was happening. And I switched on my phone. I'd never do that. And I realized we were at war. And I realized that in real time, there was a massacre occurring. And those poor people in those kibbutzes that couldn't get through to the police, they couldn't get through to the army, they got through to Israeli TV, and they were recounting in real time the invasion of these terrorists. And I was watching that. And then the next thing I see, the BBC calls. And I'm thinking, if the BBC is calling me, it's because they've tried to call the government, they've tried to call the army spokes, and nobody's answering. And the reason why the press know me is because for the last 5 years that I've been deputy mayor, I've essentially been the international spokesperson of the city of Jerusalem. And normally, when there's a clash or a conflict, it happens in Jerusalem, normally around Ramadan, around areas of Jerusalem that are problematic. And I'm always the one, talking for Jerusalem on the international media. And so they must have called me as a third or fourth option, because what do I have to do with what's going on in Gaza? But they called me, and I decided at that point, for the first time, I'm going to work on Shabbat, because my country is at war, and God has put me here for this moment, to be able to talk to the world about the horrible massacre occurring.
Yeah, it's a life or death situation.
Yeah.
How did you do
Absolutely.
that? How did you take that first call when you yourself didn't know what was happening? How did you?
So I had two sources. One was a friend of mine who is a journalist in the Arab world. So, what people, especially these deniers, now don't understand is that these terrorist savages live stream the whole thing. So I had a friend who speaks Arabic, and who was basically reporting on what they were talking about. And then I was watching Israeli TV, and I'm on a few government spokes groups, and I was getting updates. And so all I was doing was collating the information that I was seeing or hearing or speaking to journalist friends, and basically telling the world.
But
That's what I did.
You must have been in a state of trauma at that moment too. You had to hold yourself together. I mean, when you're seeing things happening, like when 9/11 happened, so many people were traumatized just by seeing it on TV. And
yes, I think the one particular woman who called into the TV, she was crying and saying, "I'm here with my little children, and there are terrorists outside." Until today, her testimony and her voice will haunt me. I don't even know if she made it or she didn't. I don't know her name. But I think that in general, the whole of Israel is going through some type of collective trauma right now.
Yeah.
But at that moment, I knew that the only way I could be useful and I could be a soldier for my people in times of war was to be that spokesperson that was telling the world the horrors of what was going on.
Yeah, we talked to a survivor from Nova Music Festival yesterday, and she is a similar mindset now. There are many that were there that are either injured or they just can't recover from it emotionally, mentally. So she says, it's hard for me, but I have to speak. I have to tell these stories to stand up for the people. I remember we were in Jerusalem on one of our trips post October 7th, and we were talking to a young girl in Jerusalem, and she was there. She was studying at university, I guess. And she said that morning she saw on the TV the attacks that were going on, and she's now traumatized because for her it was, this is what's happening there, but they're going to get here, and this is coming for me. Was that quite a well spread thought within Jerusalem? Because like you said, it's quite far away normally from the front lines of conflicts.
But that's a good question, because I think that in Sinwar's dreams, what he really hoped for was that the October the 7th attack would inspire Hezbollah to attack Israel from the north, which it did the following day, and that all the Arabs in Israel would rise against the Jews. I think that's what he hoped. But what he didn't realize is that for the last 10 years, we've been so engaged in the city of Jerusalem with bridge building activity, with economic development. I've been very involved with education, with women's empowerment. And we went also through a COVID together as a city. So even though there's maybe not a lot, but there are radical elements in East Jerusalem. The majority of East Jerusalem Arabs just want to live in prosperity and good lives in the city of Jerusalem. And if you ask them quietly which side of the fence they would go on in a future Palestinian state, I would say 90% would choose to stay on the Israeli side, because they understand that means more freedom and more opportunities. And that's really why the Arabs in Israel, but specifically the ones in Jerusalem, didn't get up and attack. Now, I kind of knew this, and it's very strange because I worry about my children and I worry about my country, but I never really think about my personal safety. Maybe I should start. But it's never a personal thing with me. I don't know why.
Yes, I think when you're a family, you're automatically outward looking, aren't you? A member of family. Fleur, I just want to circle back to one thing you said, and I don't want to let the moment go. You said, you're a soldier speaking up for your country, and you mentioned whoever that was. It was Ken. That she has said, I have to speak up. I just want to press pause a minute and say we have to speak up too. We
Thanks,
out here
Daphne.
in the nations, we out here as Gentiles, we have to speak up. Daphne,
I think you're the only people speaking up apart from the Jews, really. Maybe also the diaspora Iranians. I think very few people are actually understanding that we're in a civilizational clash at the moment. And I think it's happening in your country.
Mhm.
And I think it's happening around the world. And of course, it's happening in my region. But nobody seems to be connecting the dots except the evangelical Christian community.
Well, I just think, yes, we have to speak up because it's our own self-preservation. But to me, that's secondary. When October the 7th happened, our first thing was we've got to get out there. We must go. We've been out now 3 times and we'll keep planning. You've got to go because I don't think you can even remotely understand until you dip your toes into the nation, speak to the people, walk the streets. I'm not saying we understand, but I didn't want that moment to pass where you were saying you have to speak up and we don't recognise. I think I could be wrong in this and I'm going to perhaps step over a line, but I think in a way it's more important that we speak up.
I agree.
You do? Oh, phew. Okay, we can move on then. But sorry to move it back there, but I couldn't let that go.
No, you're right. I mean, we were on our last trip out there. We were meeting with a group, maybe 100 people or something. And you said to them, we're sorry that there aren't more people speaking up for you, coming, standing with you. And all around the room, they all went, yes. Where is everyone? Where are all our friends?
It's very interesting because I think that, and you can't compare anything to the Holocaust. You really can't. Because even with all the suffering that we've suffered, it's not even the equivalent of one day in Auschwitz, right? And the lead up to Hitler coming into power and all the atrocities that happened in the Second World War, people will always like to think, what would they have been doing? I would have been stood up and I would have said this and I would have done this. And in the end, the Holocaust happened because a lot of good people just didn't say anything. They stood at the side. And this is something Elie Wiesel always said. Evil happens because good people don't speak up. I just think that people should be looking in the mirror and saying, okay, I wasn't there then. I'm here now. What am I doing to stand with the Jewish people who are by and large peaceful, constructive, productive, helping every country that Jews settle in with their own causes, seeing themselves as an intrinsic part of that society and needing to contribute to that society. And then the state of Israel, which does so much to heal the world's problems, and yet, few friends in the moment of need. So because of that, we appreciate your friendship even more.
Well, we appreciate you and your friendship, and for us, it's what we're meant to do. We don't do it to please anyone else, to garner extra friends because of it. Even if everyone hated us, it's still the right thing to do.
You're not going to get more friends. You lose some.
We lose.
No.
We have lost some. That's what I mean.
We have lost a lot.
Yeah.
There you go.
Friends, finances, the whole thing. Thankfully, we still got a
Yeah.
house, so they haven't
Thank
taken
God.
everything.
But one of the things that we often say to people, do you want to know what you would have done during the Holocaust?
Exactly.
It's
That's what I'm saying
you're
to people.
doing today is what you
Yeah.
would have done.
And people say, well,
Yeah.
oh, but we weren't quite ready this time. What makes you think you'll be ready next time? Well, you have to prepare for these things before you can do something. Or if
Yeah.
they think, oh, I'll be ready for the next one, you think the next time is going to be easier than this time? Like,
I think
There's never an appropriate moment to stand up
No.
for decency and human rights. Nobody's going to give you a preparation, or you have to do a foundation course to get there. You either have it or you don't. You've either been brainwashed by, honestly, lies, or you've had the intelligence to understand what's really happening.
well, you pressed our buttons. You can see, can't you? We're on a roll. I would just say this as a parent. The way that we should be brainwashed and the way we should be prepared is in the way that we raise our kids. That is the best
100% agree with you.
preparation. That's the best. I was raised to stand for Israel. You were raised to stand for Israel. We've never been taught to or anything. And if there's parents listening and you have a heart for Israel, your first job is to prepare your children to. So,
and yeah, and people may say this is about Israel.
yeah.
But if it's just about Israel, why are Jewish people getting lynched in streets around the world?
Exactly.
Why
They contradict themselves.
Yeah.
They say anti-Zionism is not anti-Semitism. So why are you beating up Jews in England?
Yeah.
What they got to do with it? Oh, and that's why we know that it's rubbish, that it's about the Jews, that there's so many other conflicts around the world and nobody cares. So many more victims, dead people, and carnage, and nobody cares. And so, but this over obsession with Israel and what the Israeli army are doing or not doing to defend our country, to me, those double standards are simply anti-Semitism.
Yeah. And obviously yesterday was a great day.
Thank God.
You had the Israeli Defense Forces rescuing a Bedouin Muslim who was then brought back to Israel, who was treated by Jewish doctors. This apartheid state's working real well.
Yeah, we're really bad at it. And we're really bad at genocide as well.
Yeah,
In
really
Gaza,
bad
the
at that.
population has quadrupled in the last 10, 15 years.
Yeah.
So can we go back now? We've gone on a track because you tapped into our passions as well. October the 7th. So you're having to answer these calls. Can you continue the story?
Yes, sure. So I just started doing press at that moment. And so once you're on one channel, then nobody else is answering. And also, this is something I'm very critical of the Israeli government, that they weren't prepared for a communications war. And this is something that has been brewing for years and years and years. And there's this kind of attitude in Israel that, well, they hate us anyway. I don't accept that. We are fighting a communications war and we don't have a strategy and we're under-resourced by the government. And this is a reason why people like me and other wonderful souls around the world just stepped up. Nobody gave us this job to do. We just began to do it. The way that many Israelis started doing volunteer and helping the evacuees and helping the victims and setting up entire centers of aid. Nobody gave us a mandate. That is why Israel really is the startup nation, because people just step up to the plate. Nobody waits for an invitation to take leadership and solve a problem. So I'm very critical of the fact that, look, it's very clear that the Islamic Republic of Iran, aided by Qatar, have had a very clever strategy. They've had a lot of resources, of course, and they've had time. And slowly they've infiltrated the hearts and minds of many liberals in the West. It's almost like a bad joke. But on the other side, we haven't even been in the arena. And I've been for 20 years shouting about this, shouting about the fact we didn't have a strategy and it's not resourced. And however good the prime minister is at speaking to the international media, one person can't replace an entire system. And so when you are dealing with Al Jazeera and all the lies they're propagating, I've renamed them Goebbels TV, by the way, because all they do is coverage to delegitimize Israel. That's all they do. That's their one agenda, to put poison against Jews in Israel into the world. And they're a very popular channel. And that's all they do. And the fact that we've not even been in the game is shame on us. And it's one of the things that I would want to change in a future government.
Do you think they kind of look at it and go, what can we do? The world's media is always going to hate us. So whether we have a media department or not, I mean, who are we to, how are we going to even change this constant stream of disinformation and anti-Israel, anti-Jewish rhetoric?
I don't accept it. I agree that people are going to hate you, but we've just let them in without a fight.
Yeah.
Without putting logic and facts in front of people, with zero. You spoke, Daphne, about education. Zero education. We need to educate people on this conflict, on the history of the Jewish people in this land, on the indigeneity of the Jewish people in this land, because their narrative is false. But we haven't countered it with anything.
I would say that appallingly, even for us as Christians, when we're speaking to the church, they seem to have read the Bible and missed the point. I mean, we are just shocked that you can have education, to call it, right in front of your eyes, many of them day in, day out, certainly probably week in, week out, and they've completely missed it.
We'll say to leaders, is your church, is your ministry praying for Israel? They're like, no. Oh, why not? Oh, I've never really thought about it.
Well, one thing is ignorance or not pray, and one thing is being anti. I mean, there's plenty of churches where Israel is the aggressor rather than the victim.
Yeah.
So I think I prefer if nobody even thinks about us and not try and boycott us or stand against us.
Yeah. Talk of boycotting. How is maybe not so many people are really thinking about this right now, but how has October the 7th and the war since, how's the economy? How's that impacted Israel on that front? I mean, we know the struggles of people on the ground because of all of this, out of work, but could you maybe speak a bit about that?
The economy has been very adversely impacted. We were already having a bad year last year because of the internal strife we were having with constitutional reform and a downturn in the global economy in general. We had a good last quarter in terms of foreign investment, but in general, growth has slowed down this year. And we're talking about very robust economy that has incredible growth, way over OECD growth most years. And this is the first year in a long time where we're going to underperform. And who can blame us? We're in the middle of a war. People are fighting, leaving their businesses. We have entire swaths of the country where people have had to evacuate, lose their businesses. Our defense budget has gone up, of course. And yes, it's going to be a rough year ahead for the economy. But let me tell you something we're very good at, and that is bouncing back. That's why we're still here. We've had worse times in modern Israeli history in terms of the economy. We have a very robust economic infrastructure. We didn't 30, 40 years ago, where we had hyperinflation and we had to bring a new currency, etc. We have to update our currency. Nothing like that's going to happen, but it is going to be a little rough for a couple of years.
Yeah, because I guess when the war finishes, that the economy just doesn't turn on again.
No,
like it was
although
before.
there will be a bounce. Remember, the tourism, as you know, is almost negligible now because people are scared. I don't blame them. So that's another part of our industry which has been affected, the service industry. And again, until we get back to these communities, get back to businesses, regrow those farms, it's going to be difficult. But we've been through worse economically. And I think because our economy is very robust and it's non-reliant on, I guess, physical infrastructure, a lot of our economy is tech-based. I think we will bounce back quickly.
Okay.
I really hope so.
Yeah, I hope so. In terms of what you've seen globally, I know you've been traveling, speaking at different conferences. What's your thoughts on where the world is at in terms of, you could say the dramatic rise of anti-Semitism, you could say the unmasking of what was already there, however you want to look at it. What's your thoughts on that? Because I know when the attack happened on October 7th, for us, we were instantly messaging people in Israel that we knew, checking on them, how they were doing. And very quickly, you start seeing these things going on around the world, Jewish people getting attacked. And now suddenly we're trying to message Jewish friends around the world, seeing how they're doing. I mean, there's the concern at home, but there's also that now the concern on the international front as well.
So it's very interesting because I was asked, and I'm asked constantly to speak around the world in different places, not just by the Jewish community, but in general. But what I find is that when I go to Jewish communal events that I get invited to, I feel like I'm strengthening them. They are, first of all, so traumatized by October 7th and then re-traumatized by the anti-Semitism that didn't even allow them to mourn for the October 7th massacre. The next day, they were already on defense because basically the world blamed the victim for a brutal massacre. So I think a lot of Jewish communities have been traumatized and re-traumatized. For many of them, it's been an awakening. They, especially for my progressive friends, they've been kicked out of progressive spaces. They don't understand how, in a world where they stood up for everybody's causes, nobody came to stand with us, except, of course, good people like you. But you guys went to the progressive spaces, and they were living in those spaces. So there's a lot of trauma and re-trauma in the diaspora, coupled, of course, with the trauma that we have and the PTSD that we all have from October 7th. And the fact that we're still in the trauma.
Yeah.
Because as long as the hostages aren't home, mothers and fathers are bearing young soldiers every day. We're not going to even begin to start healing. We're still in the middle of it.
I actually had an email from a Jewish acquaintance who in New York, and he's an ER doctor, and he treats people who are spewing anti-Semitic statements and calling him names in New York, in a hospital, while he's trying to treat them. That's how close it is.
It's awful. Nobody thought, especially in America, that this would happen to them. They just didn't think about it.
Maybe as we wrap up, as a final question, as you talk to people, as you meet them, even as we have in Israel, we've met people and talked to them on the streets, and they've made Aliyah like days before to flee England to go to a conflict zone, which is wild. As you talk to people around the world, do you see a lot of that happening? Do you think you're going to end up seeing quite a big uptick in terms of Jewish people making Aliyah off the back of what's been going on?
So there is a big uptake in not just inquiries, but people actually applying to immigrate to Israel. I think there's also a small group of Israelis who have run out because they can't take it anymore. But I think they'll be back. So yes, I think a lot of Jewish people are ironically genuinely worried about their safety in the diaspora and feel safer in Israel because at least we have self-determination, our own army, and can actually determine our own destiny. And I think that if anything these terrorists have done is confirm for so many Jews in the diaspora why in Israel is needed and why it was needed 100 years ago and why it is still needed today. So they've just reaffirmed the fact that the Jewish people needed to return to our indigenous homeland.
Yeah.
Or as you would say, Am Israel Chai.
Am Israel Chai. Thank you so much for everything that you do for us.
Fleur, thank you. We really appreciate you taking the time, and we look forward to catching up again soon. So thank you so much. Really appreciate
Amen.
it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Fleur. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to this episode. Remember, if it inspired you, share it with others so we can see more people engaged in this community.